Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, I didn't even expect that. That's fantastic. I'm Nina Axelson. I'm the founder and president of Minnesota's Clean Energy Accelerator program, Grid Catalyst. I didn't pay any of these folks to do that, but I'm very flattered. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today because as a woman in the energy field for a long time, representation has been something I've thought about and lived within for a long time. And taking on this new platform really hit home for me my responsibility to it in a broader sense in thinking about representation in energy, in entrepreneurship, in STEM. And so I'm gonna flip over to some logistics here in a moment, give some grounding and introduce our amazing panelists. But I just wanted to share that I hope you all can also kind of take that in today. What's your experience that you bring in to this conversation? What's the experience you haven't had that maybe you can learn about today? And what can you do going forward to be part of change? And even if you're online, I guess I should look up there and not at my computer here. I ask you to consider the same thing. This is really an intentional conversation and an intentional event in this way. And I need to stop share here. Give me one sec. Great. So this event is made possible through the sponsorship of Full Stack St. Paul. If you're not familiar with Full Stack, it might mean you're not working in entrepreneurship and economic development in the city of St. Paul, but they do incredible work. It's a partnership between the city and the Chamber of Commerce. And they've been an incredible supporter of what we do. And I thank them for making today possible. I want to thank Wells Fargo Foundation, who actually funded our initial work with the Center for Economic Inclusion and our Equity and Access report that was produced by the center. I have to thank the Center for Economic Inclusion. We have a speaker from the center with us today, but without them, we could not have done justice to exploring this topic and starting to map out what we can do better. This region is so lucky to have a partner like the center. So if you didn't know them before coming in today, I really encourage you to get to know them because the work they're doing across multiple sectors to help companies make change, to close the racial wealth gap, it's just really incredible work. And then lastly, I want to thank the team from Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, who's been with us from the very beginning. So lots of thanks today, including to Wilder Foundation for hosting us. Last little bit of logistics. If you took anything from the back table and you have a cup or a plate, there is a little compost bin in the corner because that's how I roll. Yes, I made that sign. No, I'm not embarrassed about it. So please try and drop your things in there. Bathrooms are all the way down this hallway. There's a big sign on the wall towards the reception desk. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about the report. And then I want to get into conversation with these amazing folks because that's why you're here today. So when we started Grid Catalyst in 2021, it was because there was not enough being done to have innovation pathways in Minnesota, not the way we see them in other regions. And there's great things being done by organizations and individuals that did lift innovation. But if you were a startup or an entrepreneur looking for a path in Minnesota, it was a little bumpy. It's a little hard to find, trying to find funding, support, network. So that's what we're really trying to work on. But also recognizing, as I mentioned at the beginning, that if we really wanted to have cohorts of startups that were diverse, it can't just be a recruiting strategy. You can't say, well, we're going to just make sure that we get lots of applicants that come from diverse backgrounds. That's not a thing you can just manipulate. You can't fix it with advertising. So we approached the Center for Economic Inclusion and said, help us understand this. Because I, in my lived experience, can't fully understand what that is for the other folks we're trying to bring to the table and who we're trying to support. So we spent about 9 months thinking about, talking about, exploring, looking at the data. I'm not going to dig into that today. The report is available. You all have access to that. But when you really do think about those numbers, right? that 99% of venture funding goes to white men. And the number doesn't shock me anymore. What I find more surprising, more disappointing is when you find out things like in 2022, the numbers got worse instead of getting better. So these are the things that we have to consider when we are not funding and supporting and creating space for the folks who are going to change the world. We need everybody working on climate and the transformation of our energy system. So we have to find all the things to bring that together, but we also have to fix the systemic issues that we know prevent people from finding success. So that's in the report. Some of the key things are really looking back to how are people getting involved in STEM? Lots of STEM education work happening across the state of Minnesota. But the narrative around STEM and how we invite people to STEM matters. It's not just about having programming, but it's having programming that says, I get that your family may not be able to wait for you to get a PhD to come back with an income. I get that you may walk into a room and be sick of being the only in a conversation. So we have to change those things upstream from where we're doing recruiting into the startup programming. And that's really what we're taking to task coming out of that report. So again, I could talk about it for hours. That's not why you're here. I have these incredible speakers and I'm going to come sit down with them here and we're going to start our conversation. I work in energy. I do things. All right. Good morning. You're doing so well with that. I'm just really impressed with everybody. So I'm just going to have go down the line here and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. They're all here for a reason because of their experience and their expertise, and they're really amazing. So I'm glad you get to meet them today. Go ahead, Zara.
Okay, very good. My name is Zara Iliff, and I own Vessel, Vessyll, for spelling purposes. I have a clean energy storage device. So just to explain what that is, I'm sure a lot of you know what that is, but basically it's a backup storage device that can be loaded from solar, from wind, also from the grid. An example would be if you have solar on your home or your building, obviously that solar captures the sun and can be stored in my device. So like when you do not have, the sun isn't out, you're not capturing a lot of energy, you can use my device to continue to have clean power. Also, your system may be able to capture more energy than your building or your home uses. And so my device can load that up and you have clean energy when you need it.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Chris Brooks. I've been trying to decide how much to share because I have so many things to say, but what I will say is in 2018, I co-founded Brown Venture Group, the first Black-owned venture capital firm in the state of Minnesota. It just so happened that one of the very, very first companies that we got visibility to and ultimately decided to invest in was a clean energy company called Ecolution, Ecolution. We're first-time fund managers. It is miraculous that we ended up with this company in our portfolio. They have over 20 global patents. They're doing pilots on 3 continents in 2023 and 2024. And the big punchline statement that I've been trying to tell everybody who will listen is they're doing a St. Paul pilot in 2023 that might lead into 2024, but it could be completed in 2023. When that pilot is completed and successful, St. Paul will become the first carbon neutral major city in the world. And so what we do is we invest in ideas that will change the world. Part of our thesis is we won't make an investment in anybody who's going to make the world a worse place. And so we just keep meeting these amazing human beings all over the nation that have ideas that are going to change this world. And so I'm sitting at this table as an investor who gets to see lots and lots and lots of technologies and to talk about it from sort of like a technology perspective and an investing perspective.
Hello.
Oh, I got it. Thanks. My name is Sarun Iem, and I'm the Director of Project Vanguard at the Center for Economic Inclusion. The Center for Economic Inclusion was founded 5 years ago by Tawana Black. She is a Black woman and came together with a group of leaders locally and then nationally and said, how do we close this racial wealth gap? And so CEI's mission came about as to exclusively build a regional economy that works for everyone. And what we do is we build new systems that is racially and economically just. And the way we do that is we work in partnership with private and public sector to really equip them with resources and tools so that they can build and scale and institutionalize anti-racist work. And so that work then is at places where it's being shared, has this shared accountability with Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and Asian workers and business owners to close the racial wealth gap and build a more inclusive economy.
Will you also talk about Vanguard for a moment? Please?
Yes, so Project Vanguard came about as an opportunity, as a strategy to build wealth for Black and Brown businesses. And so Project Vanguard is, really is to answer the lack of access to capital and opportunity so that B2B businesses that are owned by Black, Indigenous, and Latina women are able to scale to that next level so that they can secure bids on with buyers and procurement, because we know that when businesses that are owned by Black, Indigenous, Asian, and Hispanic women and people, they also hire from that same community. And so the wealth is also has that triple effect into the workers that they hire.
Thank you for adding that. And thank you for all of your wonderful introductions. Part of the reason I think that that framing is so important, and especially the Vanguard program, is that in many ways, there are other parts of our economy and our community that are ahead of us. If you are here from the energy sector, that have been thinking about how supply chain and suppliers and vendors affect representation and wealth and leadership. So just knowing that that's out there knows that there's some things we can look to for, for solutions. So thank you all for that. So to our first question, each of you has experience working with diverse founders or as a founder yourself. What do you want folks new to the conversation to know about the founder experience and the exceptional challenges for women and people of color in those experiences? And if Chris doesn't go first, I'm gonna be real surprised.
All right, okay. I like to tell people I'm like a golden retriever or a lab. Like I just like to meet people and breathe. So I can't speak from a woman's perspective. What I can tell you will come from the perspective of a man of color who has grown up in this metro area and lived here almost my entire adult life. I'm going to sort of channel my business partner, Dr. Paul Campbell, while I give this response. Both of us, one of the reasons we founded Brown Venture Group is because both of us kept hearing that we were overqualified for this and you can't get the promotion for this reason. My business partner, Paul, was the #1 salesperson in Oracle for his category, and other people kept getting promoted that candidly probably were not as qualified, certainly didn't have the same results. Because this is a Twin Cities room, I think it's important for me to say that Brown Venture Group story is a Twin Cities story. I was born and raised on the South Side, graduated from MPS. My business partner, Paul, was born and raised in Rondo. He's a St. Paul kid. I'm a Minneapolis kid. The Twin Cities metro area is a beautiful place in many ways, and it's also a deeply pathological place. We like to tell stories about ourselves to others that are patently untrue. We like to point at our philanthropic infrastructure to talk about how great we are when we can't solve what seem to be some very simple problems in communities of color and the inequity in pay with women. I think as a founder of color, I can't tell you the number of times that I've had deeply inappropriate comments made to me. One of the original investors we went to talk to basically said, "Get out of town." I was like, "My umbilical cord's buried here. You get out of town." This is just our day-to-day grind. I'll end my little portion of this by talking about a Black woman that I deeply respect. Her name is Melody Hobson. She's on the cover of Forbes this month. She's a part owner of the Denver Broncos. And we interviewed her as part of our research as we were building our firm. And we asked her, what's it like being a woman of color raising capital in America? And this is her exact quote. I have it in our deck. Hand-to-hand combat every day. Hand-to-hand combat every day. So when you meet founders of color, you just need to understand that they're in hand-to-hand combat every day. And many of you in the room, most of you in the room are in a position to become really amazing allies and stand with us as we're in hand-to-hand combat every day.
Okay, so I'm a founder. I'm from St. Paul, right down here in Marshall. And I'm going to speak really bluntly. So, and I totally encourage anyone who's got questions or want to challenge me on anything I say, please do. It's an open discussion. From the start, my experience, I'm going to talk about my experience starting my company here. I heard about, we've got all these venture capital groups and, you got a great idea. Sounds great. And I just want to say, as a side note really quick, the industry that I'm in, it's growing rapidly, twofold. Every year there, I went to an energy conference in Anaheim in September, solar and storage conference. Right now, there are more projects in the pipeline for the next 2 years than there are companies to provide the products and the services for those the industry. So with that, you would think that it would be super easy to raise money and come back and be all these venture capitalist groups I talk to and present to, that it would be like that. Economically, it makes sense. I have a strong background in building companies and construction. And so that is not what I found. It's a continuous no. I don't understand why. I'm not given very clear feedback as to why no. I get stuff occasionally like, we like medical devices here. We like software. We don't like hardware. Manufacturing, no, manufacturing is really hard. Did you know that's hard? I'm like, yeah, I know it's hard. I know that, yeah. I'm doing it, I know it's hard. So another feedback I get, very common questions is, are you an engineer? And I say no, but I collaborate and I work with engineers to build a really good product. Are you affiliated with university? No, I'm not. I'm not affiliated with university. I don't have an office there. I'm not a professor. So when I get through that, it's another no. Basically, it's been no since I started. So I have decided I've taken a few small investments and bootstrapping it. And I'm finding much more open response from actual clients and people that want my device than the actual companies that are supposed to be investing. So I know this is
And
Debbie Downer.
No,
but
we all need a dose of reality. This is the reality.
Yeah.
And just a follow up, where are those clients located?
California.
California.
Yeah. All my interest is in California, usually. Nevada, Texas.
So that's a real tangible list of things keeping us from doing the right thing here. Sarun, do you want?
Yeah, I'll just add on. I think that's a powerful story, what Dr. Brooks and Zara shared. And, I just want to add that, there are cultural barriers, language barriers for some as well. And the culture really is around asking for money, right? In many cultures, we practice humbleness, and that's what we were taught. And so it's hard to break through that by asking for money when you have a great idea and you want to explore other options, and not having access to relationships because you're not part of that community. And when you talk about clean energy, there's a different language, there's a different group of people. And how do you get through that? And no has been the response by people, gatekeepers, I call them, in this business sector. And so, you know, and that's where I think Project Vanguard comes along in terms of, you know what, we'll just build our own. Based on what our community needs are. And so, you know, one of the things that I'm really proud to, you know, to showcase about Project Vanguard is that we have access to forgivable loans that we were able to secure from JP Morgan Chase to give without any interest, so that these businesses can scale to that level that they need. And when we talk about, I don't know if this is appropriate, but to go down to the nitty gritty detail of interest rates, right? How that's so predatory in mainstream, and how that actually hurts our Black and Brown community because it doesn't give us access to those mainstream financials. And quite frankly, it's, you know, not doing interest rates is reparation for us.
Mention one more thing about founding a company and working on it, is that it's a hard juggle between keeping your head down, developing your idea and your product, and then popping up and like asking for money, go back down, work on your product, you know, keep things rolling. And yeah, it's a challenge.
Powerful from everyone. When we prepped for this, I think all knew we were going to come in here and be honest today, because it was the only way we were going to make some change, right? So I appreciate what it takes to be honest in this conversation from our panelists. I'll also just note, because I know we have a lot of folks from the energy sector here, I understand deeply that we are in crisis related to climate, and that the pace of the energy transformation is fast and upon us, and the bigger players are coming in. But when we are throwing roadblock after roadblock after roadblock in front of small business owners, diverse small business owners and entrepreneurs, we are just going to have more of the same for the next 50 years. And I just really want to impress that, like, hear that from folks who are here to do the work, here to change our communities, and we make it harder for them.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, you can.
So I don't know if and when I'll get a chance to talk about Ecolution in depth, but I will tell you that Ecolution is a company co-founded by two Latinx cousins. Their executive chairman is a white guy who has deeply, deeply empowered them and helped them raise a ton of capital. His name is Craig. Craig has taken 3 companies from very little revenue to $1 billion in under 18 months each, exited 2 on the NASDAQ. He owns the tennis club in Naples. I introduced the Ecolution team to Dwayne, who's sitting right there with the dreads that I love because I'm Jamaican. And I didn't know where it would go. I didn't know what would happen, but I met with Dwayne and I thought he was really smart. So I was like, I'll introduce him to them. What happens? Craig called me and said, he's a genius. He's a literal genius. And not only is Dwayne a genius, Black energy founder in the Twin Cities metro area, but Ecolution, this business that is positioned to become a global giant leader in the energy sector, is working with his company because they provide a solution. Dwayne's company provides a solution that they couldn't find anywhere else. And Craig's taken 3 companies to $1 billion. I think one of our pathologies here in the Twin Cities is we always think the smart ideas are out there somewhere, right? We bring in the experts from the East Coast and the West Coast and Atlanta and wherever. There's a lot of smart people here too.
All of that. Yes. And I'm so glad we have Dwayne here, like, with all his genius. So clearly, lack of funding is an issue for diverse founders. We already talked about the fact that the numbers have gotten worse instead of better. So just a small question, what do we do about it? So what change and action, whether it's personal or for your organization, do you think we need to be focused on, let's say, in the coming year? And no, I don't expect short answers here.
I'm trying to defer to the ladies, but they're not grabbing the mic. Can y'all grab the mic, please? All right, I'll start. So with Brown Venture Group, our entire reason for forming this venture capital firm is because venture capital was an intractable, deeply racist sector, industry, economy. $70 trillion. And when we started Brown Venture Group in June of 2018, less than 1% of that capital was going to women, 50% of America's population. Less than 1% was going to all the Black people. Less than 1% was going to all the Latinx people. And Indigenous Americans weren't even really on the radar screen. Like, we couldn't find data to build an aggregated data set for them. So we started Brown Venture Group because of lack of access to capital. Our mission statement, if you go to our website right now, you'll see it on the very front. We imagine a world where all talent has access to transformational capital. How do you go from a deeply messed up, gated community, venture capital industry to an inclusive, human flourishing, everybody gets an equal chance to win venture capital industry? Well, our theory of change is, in the early stages, we're going to have to work closely with existing players that are leaning in, right? So if there's a continuum of, like, I care about what happens with women and people of color, we're working with the folks that care the most. But long-term, to Sarun's point, we're just gonna build the thing. We're gonna build brand new economies of scale. We're gonna build brand new ideas and methodologies. We imagine in Brown Venture Group that out of our portfolio will come a Fortune 500 Black, Latinx, or Indigenous founded company. Our energy investments, we've got 3 of them in our portfolio right now. One's in a Black founder, one's in a Latinx founder, and one's in an Indigenous founder. And we're just getting started. There's part of this conversation that is heavily dependent upon allies stepping up to the plate. There's part of this conversation that's just straight up self-determination. And we're not asking for permission for the second part. We're giving everybody an opportunity to participate in the first part. Those that opt in are gonna experience the ride of a lifetime and be on the right side of history. Those that don't, they don't.
I'll just add about, how Project Vanguard came about is really to Project Vanguard prioritize women businesses, owners, due to the inequities and opportunities to support inclusive and economic growth and wealth building for them. And so, this past summer, we did a research on Project Vanguard and through a landscape analysis of our region, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and found that there's 97,000 businesses total, and only 2.1% are Black owned, Black woman owned, and less than 1% is Latina owned. And we didn't have a sector for clean energy in our report because there's none. And just to give you some numbers that I wanted to share, that in the sort of the technical services and scientific, there are a total of 68 Black and Latina women-owned businesses combined. In like construction trades, because it intersects with clean energy, there's 148 Black owned businesses and 45 Latina owned businesses. And why aren't these numbers, like, the businesses exist? So the problem is not about that there's businesses, but the businesses aren't able to scale at the level to build wealth in the community. And so I just wanted to address that point. And so what the Project Vanguard does is not only give forgivable loans, but we work in partnership with Founders First to provide coaching and mentorship to meet them where they are at, because each business has their own path and phase. And then we also partner with NAO partners who provide real estate redevelopment and acquisition technical assistance, because place is meaningful to a business as they grow. And I think what's, to Chris's point earlier, we also do consulting and provide work with buyers who wants to work on their procurement, who wants to have a robust supply diversity, protocols and practices, so they can intentionally work with Black and Brown businesses. So that's really the key, right? It's not just only like, yes, we need to build a supply chain of B2B businesses, but employers and buyers need to step up.
I'm going to piggyback what both of you said, but especially I'm going to call you Dr. Chris.
Whatever you want.
Dr. Chris was saying that I'm going to be fine. Our company's going to be successful. We're going to push on. I don't dwell in this space for too long of frustration. When I do get those no's, it just keep working and keep improving. So I actually have a very optimistic outlook on what's to come. And like, I just don't let that part of the frustration get to me for too long.
Can I add a comment that's not Twin Cities specific? So my research, Dr. Brooks, my research is, or Dr. Chris, or as my kids call me when they're trying to make fun of me, Dr. B. My research is global in nature. My doctoral dissertation was on distributed justice metrics in the nations of the earth. And so I study other nations. In Africa right now, over 98% of investment capital goes only to white males. On the continent of Africa, what we need to recognize at some point is that anti-Blackness, anti-womanness, anti-people of colorness is a global pandemic. I know that language is kind of overused, but it's a historic global problem. And because anti-Blackness, anti-womanness is global, we need anti-racist and anti-discrimination work that's global in nature. When I was asked to speak at this conference called Fund the Gap, and I was asked by a man from Nigeria to speak at this conference. I knew nothing about this statistic. When he shared the statistic with me, I cried. An almost all Black continent that gets less than 2% of the venture capital investment. So now zooming back to the Twin Cities, I think we like to isolate ourselves and say, but that's not us. We're progressive. We're in the North. Like we weren't part of the civil rights trouble down South, and we didn't do all that. This is the new Jim Crow North. And if you measure the amount of philanthropic capital that goes into solving intractable problems in our metro area every year and correlate it to the lack of metrics, we have some deep questions to ask ourselves about what we actually value.
This is one of those moments where it's hard to be the moderator because I just want to just sit here and steep in all the wisdom. It's just really, really incredible. Thank you. I also just want to note on a couple of those things because it's one of the things that also came up in the report is, and you came back when you were talking about Paul's experience in trying to move up, is when we talk about trying to like solve for diversity, that's language, right? Like solve for diversity in the energy sector. The most common thing I hear about is because we're willing to fund and work on workforce is let's put as many diverse people into entry-level jobs as possible. And I just wanted to make sure that didn't get lost today, that when you leave, if we are only thinking about people who are not, let's just say white male for purpose of this conversation, that the only place they belong is in the entry level of the energy system so that we can now have better metrics for diversity, that's the wrong answer. It's part of what we need to do, right? People need jobs. People need jobs that they can qualify for without a lot of training. But if that is the only way you are thinking about representation in our energy sector, we have failed. Because there is talent in entrepreneurship. And especially when Zara talks about, no, I'm not at the U. No, I'm not, like, I'm real smart. I do big things. And I don't check these boxes that you expect me to check to be successful. And so we really have to think differently about some of those things. And so I'm just resonating on that of what you're talking about is like that talent, that capability is so much more than we even comprehend right now. So we've been talking a lot about founders in multiple sectors, great stats and thinking about construction and other things. Anything else that we should be thinking about in considering energy, and because energy is so small in this space, and STEM entrepreneurship, what are maybe some of the unique challenges into that space? Sorry, you've talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I just had something come up yesterday where I need a controller wired up. And I was like, well, this would be a good thing for a student to do, an electrical electrician or an electrical engineering student to do. So I called up one of our local community colleges and got in touch with someone that might be able to help. But I just asked, like, so how is your class looking for, are you fully loaded up for this next semester and the semesters going forward? And they said, oh yeah, we have a waiting list. We have a waiting list for fall 2024. I was like, well, are you going to have more classes? Because we need more electricians. Really bad. And just right there to, have an example of that blockage. I was like, oh, we need more. So my next call was to the university and University of St. Thomas, I'll just say it, and pulled up an engineering student immediately, like, oh yeah, I'm going to connect you with this person. And I was really disappointed. I'm like, oh, I wanted to find a student at the community college level. My first thoughts were that would probably be a more diverse range. That was an assumption, by the way, a diverse range of students. And that was a blockade I had yesterday. I was feeling like, oh, I'm just really concerned about the pipeline of engineers that I'm going to be working with and electricians in the future. I've heard of some programs going on. I'm sure people are aware of that I don't know, that would give exposure to high school students. I felt like in high school, I got some exposure, for example, on a different level of accounting. I did payroll and taxes. I worked for an accountant in high school, and still to this day, I do taxes for people. So I was thinking, like, if we could touch, yeah, right? Yeah, I'm not raising my hand to people's taxes, but I do though. Anyway, I really would like to partner with an organization that's getting high school students touches for working in the clean energy space and with me to learn how to install solar, to learn how to wire my devices in some work that I need. Because you always draw back to that, I think, throughout your life when you go and do other things, what experiences that you've actually had and touched.
Yeah, this reminds me of a story. I heard of a dad who he had 3 daughters, and he was a mechanic, and so he always bring them to his shop, and they would tinker around with all the mechanics as well. And gradually, when she grew up, and when one of them grew up, they broke through in the technology field and founded their own tech firm. And first, one of the first African Americans to break through that. And so I think just the exposure, right, the simpleness of it as well, we underestimate that. And where can we bring that along to every community where they don't have access to? And I like to quote one of Tawana's favorite things about seeing talent, right? There's an abundance of talent. And she says, talent is equally distributed. It's our culture value on talent that differentiates us because of race. And so, being racist is racializing any idea, racializing the body because that idea came from that person. And so when we think about clean energy, we use innovation as part of that word a lot. And innovation, first thing comes to mind is it's new, it's got to be new. But many cultures and history have demonstrated clean energy use, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's wind, whether it's electricity, had developed and created things with minimal resources and is sustainable. And it's being thought about from generations to generations, not just here and now. And I think we've become a wasteful society because of the instant gratification of the things that we create. And I think, it goes back to our work when we work with institutions. We use this water, the 6 systems change work. And one of the hardest and implicit part of the 6 systems is mental models. And so how do you define innovation? Can you see it from the other person's perspective? Can you redefine it so that it's more inclusive of others' ideas of what innovation means.
So let me turn the diamond 1 degree. Talent is equally distributed in the human population. I learned this through my doctoral dissertation, although it was sort of intuitive to me at the time. Opportunity is not. And many of you who have been in the Twin Cities for several years may remember that Bush used to run this conference where all the folks would come to downtown somewhere. I think it was like a theater or a playhouse. And they would have this map, this like human map on a screen, and would have your like relationships, like who has the most like LinkedIn, Facebook. And based on the number of relationships you had these bubbles around you. And every single year, Lars Leafblad and I would compete to see who had the bigger profile. The world is a series of constellations of relationships. And we have the ability on any given day to use choice architecture to build a different world. Right? If you did a scan right now of your constellation of relationships, you could probably think of a wide variety of people that to a greater or lesser extent are leaning into this conversation. What if you brought them all together and just said, we don't need to put this on LinkedIn, but let's do something. We have an investor that I wanted to highlight because I think there is an archetype of the type of person that we Brown Venture Group are looking for. Our investor's name is Amy Langer. I don't know how many of you would know who Amy Langer is, but she is a co-founder of a little company called Salo that just had an acquisition by Korn Ferry. I think at the time of the acquisition, they were doing between 100 and 125 million in annual revenue. When Amy became our first investor in Brown Venture Group, she brought us to the family office that was managing the investment. She took a picture with us. She asked us to send her a Brown Venture Group t-shirt. When she received that t-shirt, she took a picture of it and posted it on social media. And she has been helpful every step of the way. Amy does not need to spend time with us. She's got other things she could be doing with her life. She's in the Minnesota Business Hall of Fame. But Amy has made a decision, I'm going to lean as far in as I can. And because of that, Amy is a fantastic ally, a fantastic limited partner. And Amy's going to get to have some really amazing and unique experiences because of the way that she has decided to leverage her constellation of relationships and set the trajectory of her life. And I don't think you have to have $100 million revenue company to do that. Like my 22-year-old daughter is doing that right now. All of us have the opportunity on any given day to make decisions, to build a different world. We're in a really interesting and unique metro area where there are literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of us who dream of a different world. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's do that. What Chris said. So my last question, and then I'll give one last round to the speakers here, but there are many ways to examine the data introduced in the report. Part of the reason I really wanted to be in conversation today is that we could kind of see how the data shows up in lived experience, right? But also the data only tells a partial picture, right? One of the things that we've really struggled with is to show not only how many bodies are showing up in whatever job, but we don't have good data that says who's running the companies. It was really great to hear that, like what's showing up in businesses, but like when I was trying to find women CEOs in energy, it's a short list in Minnesota. These are not great, and we don't have that data. We don't have the data that's good enough on board representation, who's in C-suite, who's in management, that affects who has power, who has authority, who has the pathway and the network and all the things that we know are critical to those things. So because Chris brought this up in our prep, any other thoughts on how we can do better and have more accurate data and accountability to, are we improving? Are we doing the work right?
I'll go first. Well, the Center for Economic Inclusion we have lots of data, and data is what informs our work. And so when we work with our clients, I had a colleague said, we're up all in your business and your data. So all up all around it. So, and what it does, it allows us to be able to assess and become aware of the realities of the current system you're operating, how inclusive or exclusive it is, who makes the decision, and who should be part of the decision making, right? To that share power, and then from there we work to establishing an action plan. And when you are invested, when you're co-developing something, you're held accountable as well as we are. As your partner. And so that accountability then resides in our work together, and we'll revisit you in 6 months down. Hey, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And trust me, Tawana Black likes to blast good things and also be real about what our partners are doing. And so I think disaggregated data is important. I think that's what we talked about. And I've been in disaggregated data work as an Asian American woman. We were, my earlier work with advocacy was try to disaggregate data in the Asian American community, because Asian is not monolithic. As we all know, there's many cultures, there's many languages, and cultures and historical backgrounds and migration story to the United States. And so that impacts and that tells a different story of how they get to and have access to building wealth in the United States. And so I think that's where we can foster accountability. And in terms of like businesses, when disaggregated data is important for businesses with supplier diversity work and in their procurement, because it intentionally tells you what the return on investment is if you intentionally work with Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and Asian businesses. And what does this mean? You'll see a pattern and you'll see the story, and data tells story.
I'm a little bit upset that these brilliant women keep stealing my talking points. And I'm not. I think there's actually a very simple formula for how we get to several solutions that have avoided us for decades. And the very simple solution is this: identify the most pervasive challenges that our metro area has faced, sector by sector. The energy sector could do this today. Get the data lake, disaggregate, reaggregate, disaggregate, reaggregate, and do that work until you get to the answer to the actual question. What we tend to do in the Twin Cities metro area is we may disaggregate once, maybe twice, but we don't want people to get too upset at us, because then they won't move here into the cold weather and have jobs, right? So we're so very busy trying to promote our reputation and draw talent that we just don't tell the actual truth. And we won't do the hard work to get to the bottom line. Here's the secret though: when you get to the bottom line, you can solve the problem. When you solve the problem, talent's coming. I roll in Black circles. I'm Black. Black people around the nation know this about the Twin Cities metro area. The average stay of a Black person that moves here from not here is 3.6 years, the last time I checked. We've lost a lot of really serious talent through my lifetime. I mean, we lost Upsy a couple of years ago. I mean, that thing's arcing toward being a unicorn. I talked to Clarence when he left. Black founder. He just couldn't handle the culture here because he said, we don't tell the truth. We have to disaggregate, reaggregate, disaggregate, reaggregate, and do that work ongoing. It's almost like continuous improvement until we answer the actual question. And once we answer the actual question, then we can architect solutions that create a different world. But if we always stop before we get to the disaggregation, reaggregation that actually answers the question, we're going to keep throwing philanthropic dollars at stuff and not solving problems. So I know that they already said that, but that's my way of stating what I feel about this, because I really am data driven. My top strength in StrengthsFinder is analytical. And there's a lot of lazy data in this metro area.
As the CEO of Vessel, it's obviously my responsibility to continue to grow my company. That is my first and foremost responsibility. But I can't stay, like I was saying before, I can't stay in a negative space or the rejection space. I've got to keep moving on. It has, okay, but I'll go back. It has been frustrating with the Minnesota Nice thing, where I'm not getting actual tangible feedback. Like I would love them to say, or, and I've pitched to a lot of people, this is what's wrong. But what I get is me chasing the no's. As a founder, I'm constantly, did you make a decision? What do you think? Da, da, da. So that doesn't serve anyone, that Minnesota Nice thing. What our company did, especially in clean energy, especially to a diverse group we're trying to grow, is actual tangible feedback of why you have a problem with this or that, or it's not fitting. That's what I would want. And I wish I had. But like you said, I find the joy in working with companies and people that are about yes, and we're innovating and we're finding new ways for solutions that were to each challenges that come up. That's where I like to sit. So hopefully we can change a Minnesota Nice one day. I don't know how. I really don't understand how, but
Everybody here has to commit to that before they leave.
Can I add something? Yeah, one last thing that is tangible that we learned working with our clients is when you disaggregate data in the form of where is your money going to, and it expresses the value of that organization and the mission. And so I think that's a simple assessment you can do. And is it going to Black and Brown businesses? Is it intentional? If it's not, then do something about it. That's you can fix that by increasing it by hopefully 50% or 100%, whatnot. But do increments, set yourself with step goals to get there.
I'm getting the sense and feeling that the risk is not wanting to be taken for some reason. Just that's a feeling again. Of course, I have to deal off of what I feel and I assume, because I get not a lot of tangible hard feedback. But I just, the risk, I feel like it's just like too risk averse for a lot of people and not willing to make that investment.
That's one of the reasons I wanted you on the panel today, because you have that lived experience in a way a lot of others don't here. I've been telling folks for at least 2 years that Minnesota is not investing in energy tech, clean tech. We talk about it. We are doing lots of policy work for deployment and climate goals. We are not investing in the actual people trying to bring this stuff to the market that are here. They're raising their kids here. They're doing the work here. And then you add any level of outside of that 99% to the mix, and we've just doubled or tripled the problem, right? So we gotta fix all of it.
Yeah, and seeing color folks and us being a risk. Come on, what? Right? I hate that. I just want to say I hate that. So stop, whoever's doing it. So
you also have to commit to that before you leave this room today. Yeah, stop. Well, I wish we had 5 hours and like refill everybody's coffee and. But I'm just gonna give kind of a last chance for final thoughts here from our panelists. It's been an incredible conversation today. I appreciate that for folks who are here from the energy sector. This is not the conversation we usually have. It's a little bit different, but I think is so important, because if we want to be who we say we're going to be legit, this is what we have to know. So, what other thoughts?
I want the ladies to have the last word, so I'll go first. My doctorate is a doctor of theology degree. I'm a theologian. You cut me, I bleed theology. My holy book says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Did you know that the Twin Cities metro area has the largest number of mega churches per capita in the nation? Combined with the largest number of Fortune 500 companies in the nation, which means that if you crunch the data a certain way, we have the most Christian wealth per capita in the nation. And as a man of faith, this is confounding to me. Not only do I imagine that all people who claim the faith that I claim are family members of mine, as a lifelong born and raised member of the Twin Cities metro area, I sort of think of the Twin Cities as my family as well. And I have watched my family mistreat people of color and women my entire life. And what kind of family does that? I think we can do way better. Last night, there was this event at JA, and I said this sort of off the cuff, but it's true. I actually am of the opinion that things are changing very rapidly in the Twin Cities right now. I think there's a lot of very good new work going on. In 2017, there were 0 venture capital firms led by Black people. In 2018, there was 1. In 2021, there were 2. And in 2023, well, in 2022, there was 2 more joined. So there are now 3 Black-led VC firms in the Twin Cities metro area after there being 0 for the entire history of the venture capital industry. We received a call a few weeks ago, Brown Venture Group, from a couple of indigenous women in New Mexico that want to launch an indigenous women-led fund. Guess how many of those exist in America right now? Things are changing rapidly. And I think we, what I've sort of described, what we've described as sort of the pathology or part of the pathology of our metro area, this like Minnesota nice, fake progressive stuff, we can turn that on its head in a heartbeat. We can live up to our values and our ideals and what we externally message to the rest of the nation and the rest of the world. And we could become a truly progressive metro area. How do we know when we've arrived? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And until we are fully capitalized, it's really challenging to think of this metro area as family. We feel like foster kids, not forever family.
That's hard to follow up with. Thank you.
Got it.
I would like to put a challenge or request out to other founders. One of the things I talked about earlier is, working on your company, developing however you're contributing to the clean energy industry. And this panel has inspired me to, plus your report, is to come up from my company and then get more involved. So I'm definitely gonna dedicate myself to doing that, and I encourage other founders to do that, because that juggling can be tough. And sometimes our spots, we get a lot of energy from working on our own things in our innovation. That's our sweet spot, our happy spot. But there's some really good suggestions and work that's been done that Dr. Chris is talking about, that you're talking about, and in this report. And you've got my commitment to definitely being part of this, in my place in the clean energy industry.
We owe you the commitment back to give you the space and the resources you need to do all of that.
I don't know how to follow that. I'll just do a shameless plug. Connect with us if you want to do work. We'll meet you where you are at. I think, just to quote Frederick Douglass, is power concedes nothing without demand. And so you have to be in demand it intentionally. And we're going to demand new systems to be built as well.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes.
Maximizer.
No. How dare you? I didn't know we were going to be making Gallup jokes today. So we could take one question probably from the audience, if there is one. Greg Mast? Oh, conceding to Julia. All right, Julia. Could you hold on? Sure. So that they can hear you. Up in the cloud.
I was going to say, you don't owe us the free consultation on this per se, but I speak for a few folks in the room who work in the nonprofit industry, right? And we're the land of 10,000 nonprofits, especially in the energy and environmental space. And I think we have a hard time recognizing the harm that's been done in that space. And sometimes I think the best thing for us to do is get out of the way, but I'm wondering if you have ideas for how can we be part of that? I love the example you gave of reparations, forms of climate reparations, forms of what's the restorative and transformative justice work we could be doing, and knowing that there's a lot more that time owed to that discussion, and probably money on our behalf paid to consultants to help us figure it out or something, but curious your thoughts on that.
I have a very well-formed thought on this. I've been thinking about this a lot. Because you know how where we got the name, the land of 10,000 nonprofits, was from Chicago, the land of 10,000 businesses. So what I think needs to happen, especially disproportionately in our metro area, is a season of mergers, acquisitions, and shutdowns. Right? What if we got all of the nonprofits sort of like gathered together by sector, identified what was really working well, honored deeply those whose things are no longer working well, and created efficiencies and extra capital that could then be redeployed into things like this. The nonprofit sector in the Twin Cities metro area has a deep self-interest to survive because there are so many jobs attached to it, but it is toxic charity at its worst in many cases. And we just have to move away from it, y'all. Like, we love being the land of 10,000 nonprofits with our huge nonprofit corporate boards and, you know, people getting their pictures on stuff and putting their names on stuff. Like, it's killing us. We got to move away from it. So I would say, I don't know who could ever lead this, but if there was a season, like a 10-year season of mergers, acquisitions, nonprofit shutdowns that led to a more efficient, effective nonprofit sector, especially respecting those who have the closest proximity to the challenges that we face, instead of like saying, well, this large organization with a $50 million budget, clearly they've got the answers. Not in North Minneapolis where I go to church, they don't. If we can do that, I actually think we could lead the nation in a movement that does that.
That seems about as good a place to end as any. I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to go back and watch this more times than I probably should admit. I'm just so grateful and compelled by this group of leaders and change makers. They're brilliant. I hope everybody really could hear them today. If not, go back and watch again. That's your assignment. But I'm not used to leaving an event or a conversation with so much clarity. Yes, there are still aspects of this where we need to examine the problem. I'm not saying we know everything, but we don't have to wait. We don't need a 5-year study to know what the problems are and start solving them today. They have given you things you can leave today and do. And so that is really upon us to make change. I am so honored and grateful for today's conversation. Thank you for being with us. I had a note in the chat that folks were interested in the contact information. So for those who attended, we'll make sure that you can connect and help Chris grow his LinkedIn bubble. But hopefully in person, yeah, gotta get Lars. But to be in person too, like we need these connections. And I just want to keep encouraging folks this is a room full of people who I don't think are usually in a room together. So that's a good start. But where we go from here, and as I keep saying, is what we do next matters most. So please take that with you today and all of this wonderful wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.